nonverbal communication. And my guest is Ruth Eisenberg, who is a presentation consultant. And she has wonderful credentials. She is Professor Emeritus in Communication at Pace University. And we're going to find out all about the speaking in public and speaking before groups. Ruth, I suppose we should start by covering a question that I think faces all people. Why is there so much fear in speaking in public? And is it the worst fear in the world?
Well, there's only one fear that some people think is worse. Can you guess what it is?
No, I can't.
It's death.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know, in this country, there are always list compilers.
Yes.
And some compile lists that say that the fear of public speaking is number 1, and some say it's number 2, but it's always alternating with death. Oh, there are a lot of reasons for it, I think, Norm. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was listening to rebuts on National Public Radio because apparently a week ago somebody talked about fear for performers, and he said that the whole cure was in practice. Well, these rebuttals were that the whole cure is not in practice. Practice helps, but it's a fear of failure, for one thing, the sense of going before others and not performing up to your own standards. And as a matter of fact, some people, for some people, that's the worst.
What do you mean by up to your own standards? I don't quite understand what that means.
You have a goal for yourself in terms of what you want to accomplish with the audience. You have a goal for yourself in terms of how you want to appear to the audience. You have a goal in terms of the kind of information and the amount of information you want to convey. And any of these can set up a sense of, I'm not going to accomplish what I want to do, and that's a fear of failure. And if a person tends to be more of a perfectionist, you know, the I dotter, the T crosser, those people have a much worse time. People who accept the fact that they can't be perfect, and Lord knows in speaking you cannot be perfect. If they just accept that, they have a slight edge, but then they have other reasons to be fearful because, you know, your basic question is why? Why are people afraid? So, fear of failure. You don't have full control. I mean, right now we don't have full control because the camera people have some control that we don't have. So you don't have full control. You cannot control the perceptions of the audience, which of course you'd like to think of me this way. And some people won't think of you that way. Then of course there's the real bugaboo of the fear of forgetting, that horrible sense of, oh my God, what if I go blank? And it's happened to all of us.
You know, you mentioned hearing this program, and there's a term in show business called flop sweat.
Yes,
and,
I thought that was for horses.
and basically, that's the fear of failure.
Yeah.
People just perspire so much, and when they're up there, and everything seems to be getting away from them.
Wasn't there a movie? There was a movie, the one set in Washington, television, and the guy sweated so much that he couldn't get the job. So we know that it's a terrible thing for a lot of people. On the other hand, there are some people who will stand up before an audience on a moment's notice and speak extemporaneously. Or I've seen a situation where a man was called at the last minute to read a speech which was written for someone else, and he looked at it for 30 seconds and delivered it as if he'd lived with it all his life. How come? He is a rare bird. He is the exception to the rule, believe me, and I wonder if this man didn't have some performance capabilities in an earlier life, or was just an extraordinarily articulate, self-confident guy. But he is really the exception. Most people go through some degree or another of agony. It bothers me when people start getting upset the night before. I mean, I've been told stories of sleeplessness and vomiting, and I don't even like to tell all these stories or even allude to them, because if you don't have the fear, I don't want to create it.
Let's accept the fact that
it's normal. It's normal.
But how do you overcome it?
Well, you don't, and I don't think you should, actually, because if you overcome it, the danger is that you come across as dead. You know, California laid back, so cool, so relaxed, and the audience wants to feel that you're on edge, that you're with them, that you're alert, that you're really trying to succeed. And that, of course, is where the energy is working positively. The thing is, and this is a complicated business, and I probably have lost your question along the way, but one of the problems is that when people feel themselves getting nervous, two things happen. One is that the perception of nervousness makes it worse. instantly makes it worse. Oh my God, look how my heart is going. And then the heart seems to take off even more. The other thing is, and this is the one that's more troublesome in a way. It's troublesome, that is, in terms of the receiver of the presentation. That when you feel this kind of nervousness, you go into many speakers go into a mode of, I've got to control it. I can't let them see how nervous I am. And what they do is they tighten up.
But you're talking about the fear, and you're talking about the cause, and you're talking about the effect.
What can you do?
What we want to do is to find a way to help people to overcome it. Someone has to make a speech next week and wants to do a good speech. How does one overcome it?
All right, well, again, it's a complicated answer. The first is you prepare. You don't go in cold. You're a speaker who can just get up and let go is a lucky individual. Preparation helps.
And what sort of preparation?
Rehearsing, working your talk through. I don't like for people to write a speech out. I prefer them to just indicate their ideas in a kind of order. And let me hold that for later if we get to it. But once you have the framework, the sense of what you're going to say, you say it out loud. And I think that it's very helpful to people if they work with a tape recorder. If they have video equipment at home, that's even better, because then they can watch themselves as well as listen to themselves. But with a tape recorder, you play it back, and you not only can then edit yourself, oh, I spent too long on that, or gee, I need to say more about this, but you can measure for time. You can also stimulate your own memory because you've heard yourself say this. So that's one thing.
Let's stay with
but
practice
when you're there,
for a moment.
Right.
Let's stay with practice and then go on to something. So what do you do in terms of practice? Do you do it over and over and over again?
No, my suggestion is knowing what your time frame is. Know yourself in terms, are you likely to shrink your material or expand it? That's important, because when you get in front of an audience, different things happen from when you're practicing by yourself. So you have a 20-minute presentation, let's say. That's reasonable.
Is that an ideal time?
Nothing's ideal, but it's reasonable.
Okay.
You practice to speak 20 minutes or your take on yourself. And you see, that's one of the reasons for taping. You can actually time it, because unless you write it down, most people forget when they start and then they forget when they end to look at their watch. So you can time it on the tape. You practice enough so that you feel you have control of the flow of the talk, you feel comfortable in the way the ideas are coming, and then you stop. And ideally, you don't think about that speech for several days.
Really?
Because if you practice too much, if you practice too much, you're going to get stale on it.
But you're saying that you do not write out your speech.
Yeah.
You organize it and you prepare notes.
You prepare notes.
Do you work for notes? Do you put them out on the lectern?
I don't know anybody who objects to that. I mean, if you strew them out like a deck of cards, it's going to look a little awkward. But if you have your notes in card form, not in regular paper, that's too obtrusive. But depending, we're talking about business speakers. Business speakers making presentations usually have to have some kind of visual aids. And the visual aids are sometimes exactly the notes, or they are complementary to the notes, so that those visual aids also become guides to the thinking for the speaker as well as the audience, and you can rely on those. But Ronald Reagan did speakers a big favor, and I don't usually speak in those terms because he was called a great communicator, and I don't think he was. But he did speakers a big favor. In his second term of office, when his memory wasn't as sharp as it had been, he would come before in the not the Oval Office, but wherever they make presentations, and he was supposed to give an award to somebody or announce somebody was taking office or whatever, and he'd slip a little piece of paper out of his pocket, check the information, slip it back in, and then he'd go. Now, I have asked audience after audience after audience, do you remember him doing that?
No.
And that's the answer, no. People don't remember, and that's the point, that the notes, if they used unobtrusively, help the speaker. They make him appear more comfortable and polished and correct, and the audience, by and large, doesn't notice. so that between the little helps for the speaker and the use of the visual, you can keep visuals, plural.
What effect does the size of an audience have upon the speaker? If you know that you're speaking to millions of people as opposed to a small group of 20 or 5, does it affect the speaker?
That's an individual thing. I have had people say to me, I can talk to 5 people, but I can't talk to 20. Or I can talk to 20 people, but not a large group. Then other people will say to me, I'd much rather talk to a large group. I can't see them, but I don't want to talk to 10 or 15 people because they're all in front of me.
So you're in this auditorium, and you've got 1,000 people out there, and you see this huge, vast faces up there.
You don't, because the room is usually dark.
But you think that they're out there.
Yeah.
And then what happens? How do you overcome the fear of hugeness?
Well, for one thing, you don't overcome it. I mean, you simply say to yourself, ultimately, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is I won't get my message across. But what you have to do is put yourself into a mode. And that is that the speaker is a conveyor of valuable information. Information that only that speaker has and only that way.
Building up your own...
You build your own self-worth.
What about the friendly face technique?
Well, you gave me a large audience in a darkened room. You can't see them, except maybe in the front row, because the lights will, blind you for everything else. But in most situations where you can see the audience, in almost all situations when you can see the audience, the textbooks tell you this, try to find a friendly face. Now, that is a meaningless statement unless you translate it into find a colleague, find the manager who gave you this assignment, find the client who has always been very supportive. With luck, they are scattered, and so you have touch points that you can go to, and you look to see how you are going with them. They are your friendly faces. When you find friendly faces, normally what do? You smile. It's a greeting. So you smile, a greeting.
Smiling. Now, there's a subject. One of the subjects that faces most speakers is, how do I start? What do I start with? Do I start with a joke?
No, not unless you are an expert joke teller, and it's surefire, and it's not going to offend anyone. And these days, one of those 3 is going to rule it out.
So how do you start?
Well, there are a lot of ways to start. I mean, in one of my little books, I have a listing. One of the things you can do in starting is ask some provocative questions. Now, these are questions to either get people thinking, or they're participatory questions. How many of you out there? So you get a show of hands. You can do what's very, very simply called a courtesy opening. Gosh, it's so good to have the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm really glad you invited me, and I appreciate the time that you're giving to this. Something of that kind. It sounds kind of schmaltzy, but it really works. Another thing is to refer to an event that everybody knows, the baseball strike right now. Something that's happening in world events, some catastrophe that happened, something that's happened in this company, in the company you're addressing, or in your company. That people are aware of.
And if you're really bold, something that happened 5 minutes ago.
But you see that you can do that only if you have another prepared opening. But you should have a prepared opening. If you're very confident, then you can slip in the other one quickly. You can create a word picture, a kind of anecdotal thing that people are familiar with. I make them up on the spot when I give illustrations. You can shock people, make a shocking statement. There are 10 different techniques. I think I've named half a dozen that you can use, but the thing to do is use something you are fundamentally comfortable with. If you're a storyteller, open with a story. If you're somebody who likes to keep up with things, open with something that is current. If you're a questioner, open with the questions to get people involved. Because the thing is, you're trying to find your comfort level. And you want to get a response from the audience.
That's the important thing.
Yeah. Then you tell them what you're going to talk about.
I just do want to point out to our viewers that today my guest is Ruth Eisenberg, who is a consultant in presentations, and we're discussing making presentations, verbal communication, and public speaking. The public speaking, we talked about the size of an audience. Sometimes it's just one-on-one. The same techniques hold, don't they?
In many ways they hold. The big advantage one-on-one, Norm, is that people are doing what we're doing now. They are sitting. And that minimizes a lot of the self-consciousness, which is one of the things that's part of the fear pattern. Sitting, you're less exposed. But fundamentally, even in a one-on-one, you should have your talk organized. I define presentations in any way as organized conversation, because I want people always to have a conversational tone, not get into technical language and the formalities and so forth. But the material has to be organized. You have to have an objective. You have to know what you want to accomplish reasonably in whatever the interaction is. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Aristotle set down the basic rules that an introduction tells you what you're going to tell them, the body tells them, and the conclusion tells them what you've told them, and they work. We still teach them because fundamentally they work. And even in a one-on-one, you'd be surprised that practically nobody ever summarizes. It makes such sense. Well, let's see, what we've talked about today is this and this and this, and what you want me to do is pursue that.
Someone once said to me that you start with the summary and then the rest of it just fills in the details.
Well, in a sense, that's true, because when you tell the audience what you're going to tell them, you're forecasting. So in a way, you are pre-summarizing. But sometimes when I'm working with clients, and they just are all over the place in giving the information, I'll take them all the way through. Because sometimes they say to me, do you want me to stop? I really don't know where I'm going. And I'll say, no, take it all the way through. Because when they get toward the end, they say, well, what I'm really trying to say is, or something of that kind. And then you get the nuts and bolts and you start all over again.
Presentations are notorious for boring the audiences because people don't seem to realize the state of mind of the people who are sitting there. Now, I think that's very important. And I know there are techniques for understanding who they are and what they're doing and how much they can retain what you're giving to them.
All right, start with the last one first. Your expectations for your audience should be reduced. We are not good listeners in this country, and not for any fault in ourselves, but for the fact that we don't learn how to listen, and listening is a skill. Our schools spend most of their time on reading and writing, practically none on speaking, and absolutely none, at least on the university level, on listening. So if you don't learn how, it's hard to do the skill. We have poor memories. Research indicates that we forget half of what we've heard as soon as we've heard it, and then the fallout can go down as low as 15% a week later. So you have to reduce your expectations for the audience. Therefore, you have to give them less to help them to remember more. I lost the first part of your question, though, because I answered the last part.
We're talking about the audience themselves. And
now, the other thing for the speaker is, and to me this is fundamental, the speaker has to sit down and try to figure out what he or she knows about that audience, whether it's a man, a woman, a large group, a small group, whether you categorize them into stereotypical groups or there are certain key individuals like a decision maker. What do you know? What can you figure out? What have you been told? What have you learned about these people? And then you ask yourself the fundamental question, what does he or she need to know? Of what I know, and I have to know more than I can possibly tell, what does he or she need to know in order to make a decision or conduct his or her business better or whatever? And in this way you select the ideas. When you're working to people's needs, they are more interested. Then you don't become boring. You become boring when they don't see a relevance in what you're talking about.
What about the shock treatment? In a speech, no matter how long it is, short, long, there are times when the audience's mind can wander. Something will trigger them off. Now, I've heard speakers who will do something that will suddenly shock the audience. Is that a good technique? Whether it's pounding the lectern or jumping out away from the microphone and saying something, are these techniques useful?
It's a complicated question insofar as it depends upon what the speaker is trying to accomplish ultimately. If it's shock for shock's sake, no. I don't think that's useful at all. Personally, I only like to use shock up front in the talk. I don't like shock at the end. I believe that a presentation, whatever it is, should end on a positive note. Should end with a sense of, we can do this, we can overcome this obstacle, we can work together. Because I partly believe that the old business of the, if you can't get the message, if you don't like the message, you get the messenger, stays true. And if you end negatively, shocking people, making them feel down, I'm against negative political campaigning for this reason.
I mentioned, Ruth, coming at...
But along the way you asked, there are other things you can do other than shock. If you want to keep your audience with you, anecdotal, everyday experience, how this applies, how this has happened to me.
Anecdotes are important.
They're very important. On organization cards that I've designed, I have proofs, clarifiers, and/or illustration. And illustration, which can be a graphic or it's a story, a verbal illustration, is the most underused and the most valuable technique in speaking and keeping audiences tuned in.
A technique that I have used when I prepare is I just make a list of topics, and right alongside them, I make a list of anecdotes. Now, I may not use them all, and I may not do them in that order when I'm speaking.
Yes.
But I do have this anecdote to drop in there at that moment, and that's the extent of the notes that I use in making a presentation.
And that's probably one of the reasons why you've been so successful.
I don't know how successful.
Well, you are.
I'm not afraid. I know that.
No, but they work.
What about coming out? I've seen some people who step right out of the lectern, get right into the audience. Some of the professional speakers, some of the trainers, they get right out in the audience and work from the audience. Some of them work with a wireless microphone, and some of them, if the group is small enough, will just project the voice. Is that a good technique?
It's a good technique if you're in sales. It's a good technique if you're in training. It's a difficult technique because you are making yourself very vulnerable and very open and very exposed. And you have to have a lot of confidence or a lot of bravado even to do something like that. So I don't suggest it for all people because for some people it's enough to get up behind a lectern, much less to step out and be seen in total.
Protection?
The lectern serves that way for many people, yes. They can hide behind it. They have a place to put their notes that people won't observe. So going into an audience is saying to the audience, I'm with you, I'm part of you, I want to be with you. You have to be careful, though. You can't get too close. If you get too close, then people feel a little threatened, because after all, you're standing, they're sitting. So that everything is a kind of double-edged sword, I suppose. I think if you are a speaker who wants to be available to an audience but not go into the audience, stand aside of the lectern or the table. Don't have that in front of you as a barrier. You have it for your notes. You can even lean on it, not to hold you up, but to touch it. But it makes you look more available to the audience, more open.
We've talked about overcoming the fear. We've talked about relating to the audience.
See, you're summarizing.
But what we haven't discussed is the speed at which you speak, and we haven't discussed the language that you use and the pronunciation of words and all those things which are within the whole concept, but is a completely different subject or part of the same subject.
Well, it is and it isn't. The speed at which you speak is a relative thing. I have found that most people who are accused of talking too fast don't really talk too fast. That is what their rate per minute is of words per minute. But they throw ideas too fast. And then audiences get confused. And so you talk too fast, I couldn't follow him. The language should be a conversation language, even in very technical talks. Because we are people talking to people no matter what. And if you have to use technical language, you define your term at least once, even though it's known to people.
Depending on the audience, you certainly are not going to define to a professional audience professional terms.
No, but acronyms you are, because you have to remind people. And even in a professional audience, everybody doesn't have exactly the same training. Then in terms of things like regionalisms or stuff like that, Regionalisms have become more widely accepted, and if people are working in not a metropolitan area, but in a day travel area, they really usually do not have to worry about a regionalism. Foreign accents are problematic only if the speaker talks fast, because audiences have to adjust to the accent and adjust to the speed, and most audiences will adjust to one thing at a time. So that if you have a foreign accent, I would suggest that you speak a little more slowly. And if you have been told that you speak too fast, I would suggest you look at not the rate, but you're trying to say too much all at once.
We talked about not working from a written speech and working from notes. I have unfortunately been in places where a speaker, supposedly someone who's very professional, has a large job with a large company, will read the speech and not look up, or maybe look up every once in a while to make sure the audience is still there.
And then not see if they are.
Why do people who should know better, why do they bring up a book, a loose leaf book with the speech in it, usually typed in very large type, and turn the pages and do that? Don't they know better?
Some of them don't know better. Some of them have the speeches written for them by speech writers who should know better and who don't always know better. Some of them just are using this as a security measure. The one time I think a speech should be written is if you're saying something that's controversial and you need to have a text, or it's a very formal, like a policy statement, and you want people to have access to it. But by and large, it's used as a tool to establish comfort, and it doesn't work. Because if you have to learn how to speak in public, and we do, you have to learn how to read in public too. And there are different techniques. And reading in public, the first thing you have to do is work on the script. You've written speeches, and you know that the language has to be much more colorful, much more direct. The sentences have to be shorter. I have revised speechwriters where the sentences sort of peter away, and they have to end with an impact. You also have to pick up the style of the speaker, so that if he's comfortable using some kind of transition that's sort of a hallmark for him, you get it in there. Little things like that. Then they have to learn to read and know how to pause, like I'm doing now, where, you just let the words kind of hang in the air. That's a different technique, and it has to be taught.
And one of the things that you really have to learn when making a speech is how to say goodbye. And that's what we have to do right now, because we've run out of time.
Okay.
And I thank you very much for coming and enlightening us. My guest today is Ruth Eisenberg, who is a consultant in presentations. She certainly knows all that there is to know, and certainly has tried to convey what she knows about making presentations. The name of this program is Business Talk, and I'm Norman Liss. And until next time at this time, good luck.
Thank you. That was fun.